sick and tired of your love-hate relationship with wine?
Welcome to the Feel It Alcohol-Free podcast. Hi, I'm Coach Ruby Williams.
And I'm Coach Susan Larkin.
We're two former wine lovers turned alcohol freedom coaches exposing the lies about alcohol.
And giving you, our listeners, the tools to break free so you can feel lit.
And when you're lit, you'll feel healthier, freer, and more in control of your life.
So relax, kick back, and get ready to feel lit alcohol-free.
And don't forget, grab a copy of our wine-free weekend guide after the show. Welcome. I'm so excited to record another episode. And this month, it's October. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Happy October. And we invited a special guest to share her story a little bit around this subject. So welcome, Tabbin Almond. Yeah, she's had a drinking career that started early and really took off when she worked in advertising. And her drinking made her miserable and affected every area of her life. But now, having overcome her own addiction, she's a coach, a blogger, podcaster, and speaker to help others control alcohol and find freedom. And we'll be talking about her book launch. Also, I'm so proud of you, Tabbin. So welcome to the Feel It Alcohol-Free podcast. Yeah.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah. Would you like to get us started by just sharing a little bit about yourself and maybe a background about your alcohol-free journey? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as you can tell by my accent already, probably, I'm a Brit. I grew up in the countryside on a farm, and alcohol was completely normalised in our lives. Not that we drank as children, but the adults did, and it was completely normal and kind of expected. And my brothers and I got told off by my parents for calling the vet out once, and my parents were away for the day. And when he'd finished with the cow that was having a difficult calving, we invited him in to have a wash up and stuff, and we offered him a cup of tea. And my parents came back, and we were all sitting at the kitchen table with cups of tea, and they were angry with us for offering him tea and not alcohol. So it was like expected. It wasn't just, something that people did. That's how we do things around here. So unsurprisingly, I kind of followed suit. My mother had really quite a problem with alcohol, and I always vowed I wouldn't turn out like her, but gradually I did. To begin with, for a long time, it was just what I thought of as social drinking. And it was, as teenagers, going to the pub, because the pub's a very big thing here in the UK. And I would go off to the pub with my friends, and we were underage, but the landlords kind of knew our parents. It wasn't a big deal. And then I went to university, drank more. I studied French, went to cognac for a year, drank even more. and then I went into advertising, and I fitted right in. It was a really boozy culture back in the 80s, because I'm quite old. And it was, I loved it. We drank every day at lunchtime. And then
wow.
Afterwards. Yeah.
It reminds me of the Mad Men episode. Was it still like that in the 80s? Like that's from like the 60s, right?
Yeah,
that show.
It was. Yeah. And in fact, in my first agency, there was a long corridor with a yellow carpet that was called the Golden Mile. And all the board directors had offices off there, and you'd go sort of through a little bit, which was where their PA sat, and then into their office, and every single one of them had a drinks cabinet and a fridge. And there was, they weren't full of non-alcoholic drinks. You might find the odd mixer in there, but basically it was booze. And the sort of obvious thing to do was to arrange meetings with them for around about 5 o'clock. And then
you got a drink.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that's how it was. And I think I probably knew that I drank more than other people. You'd go to a dinner party and the wine would get stuck at the other end of the table, and I'd be going, come on, pass it up. But,
I remember that.
But it wasn't really until we'd moved from London down here to the southwest, and my husband was away quite a lot with work, and I was at home with 2 small children. And then I was drinking on my own, and that's when I realised, hang on, I seem to be really relying on this. And it just was like a big preoccupation. I didn't have any really spectacular rock bottoms. I had a couple of blackouts, never when I was on my own with the children, but I just knew that I was not functioning very well. I remember saying to John, my ex-husband, that I felt like I was sleepwalking through life. And I didn't really know at that stage what it was, but with the benefit of hindsight, it was alcohol.
Yeah.
It was
Yes.
dulling me. Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
I relate to that too. Sleepwalking through life. That really explains it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in 2013, so 11 years ago, things were going pretty wrong in life. My marriage fell apart, and I was left with really very significant financial problems. And my husband left at the beginning of November, and then in late November, early December, I went for a routine mammogram. I was actually on 6 monthly mammograms because I had had a lump which hadn't gone away, and they sort of said, oh, well, we'll just check it with a mammogram, and because there is a lump, we'll keep checking it. Mm-hmm. And I had this routine mammogram, and I had a letter a few weeks later, which arrived around about Christmas time, saying, "Dear Mrs. Almond, happy to say no abnormalities detected." And I thought, well, that's good. And then I had this, it was an utterly weird experience. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I just had a real deep gut intuition that letter was wrong. No pain, no symptoms. I just thought, that's not right. There's something the matter. And I can't explain it. But it was a really strong feeling. It woke me up in the night, and I thought, oh, that's a bit weird. I'd had a similar feeling about the marriage and what was going on there, and I'd been right. So I just thought, do yourself a favour and listen, because you were right last time when you had a similar sort of feeling. Mm-hmm. And I had been having therapy over the breakup of the marriage and stuff, and I think I'd just opened an awareness of my subconscious a bit. I was just listening to myself better. So I I booked an appointment to see the doctor, and I live in a very rural area. I know my doctor quite well, and he knows that I'm not a sort of histrionic person, maybe, I don't know, but he thankfully listened and said, okay, well, let's get you checked. And within 3 or 4 days, I was in the hospital. And as soon as I saw the consultant, she was a surgeon, and she took one look at it and she said, yeah, I'm really glad you're here. I don't like the look of this. And then she explained that what they would do is send me to have another mammogram, and then after that they would do an ultrasound, which hadn't been done. So far I'd only had mammograms. So I had the mammogram done, and then the guy came in, and the consultant surgeon had said the guy who does the ultrasound won't volunteer any information, but if you ask him outright, he'll tell you what he thinks. So this guy came into the room that I'd been shown into and said, okay, well, I've just had a look at your mammogram. It all looks fine. I don't really understand why you're here, especially as you only had a mammogram very recently. And so I explained to him, and he wasn't unpleasant, but he was a bit patronising. He was a little bit, well, let's just do this, and then we can put your pretty little head at rest, and you
go
can
ahead.
go off.
Go bye-bye.
Yeah. And so he started doing the ultrasound, which is just like the ultrasound that you have when you're pregnant. You know, they get the cold jelly and stuff. And he did it, and he was very quiet, didn't say anything. but was looking and kept looking at the screen and adjusting dials and things like that. And in the end, I said, "What can you see?" And he was looking at the screen and he turned around to look at me. And his expression was completely different to what it had been before. And he said, "What I can see is a woman with potentially life-saving instincts." And I went,
Wow. That's
and he said, "Yeah, you have got a tumour. It's a DCIS, which stands for ductal carcinoma in situ. So it runs along one of the ducts in the breast." And he said, "It's looking at this. It's between 4.5 and 5 centimetres long. When it was removed, it actually turned out to be a bit bigger than that." Wow. And he said, "It's big. We need to get this sorted." He said, "I'm going to do a biopsy now. The biopsy isn't to confirm whether there's cancer there. There clearly is. The biopsy is to tell us what sort of cancer, what's caused it." Mm-hmm. He said, "It's almost definitely hormonal, but there are different things." He said, "Mostly when we see this, it's an estrogen sensitive. They call it an estrogen receptor," okay, which is what mine was. I then asked the obvious question of, has this happened because I've been taking HRT? And he said, "We just don't know. The jury is completely out." And as far as I understand, it still is, this whole connection between breast cancer and HRT. But he said...
what is HRT for those that don't know it?
Hormone replacement therapy.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Which, and I'd been having like really horrible hot flushes and stuff like that. So I'd gone to the doctor, and I remember joking in the chemist once when I picked up my prescription, "Oh, these are the magic pills." I don't know. I mean, as soon as I was diagnosed, I stopped taking it.
Okay.
And once I'd had my treatment, I was then put onto a drug which actually stops your body producing estrogen.
Okay.
So instead of putting more estrogen into my body, we were stopping any going in there at all. So.
Yeah. I have one question though. My obvious question is like, why didn't they catch it with the mammogram?
I asked that question, Ruby. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mammograms are, the way they work, as I understand it, and I'm not a scientist, but they work on the density of the breast tissue. And nearly always the density of a tumour will be different to the density of the rest of the breast tissue.
Okay.
But not always. Mm. And they think that there's somewhere between 5 and 8% that are where people are told there's nothing to worry about, and there is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Even though our health system is creaking somewhat, it's not brilliant here at the moment, but actually the protocol is now different. Mm-hmm. If somebody was to go to the doctor with a lump today, they would have two checks. So there would be a mammogram and either an MRI or a ultrasound or a CT. Yeah.
Well, actually,
so they do two things.
I just came for mine. I still have the little bracelet on because I literally just rolled in, and I do an ultrasound every year because I have dense breast tissue. So here in the United States, they actually order an ultrasound every time I do a mammogram. So
that's
I guess
brilliant.
And how often are you doing your mammogram? I think mine's every 3 years, something like that. How often is... Yeah,
I do mine every year just because my grandmother died of breast cancer when she was 60, so she was pretty young. So yeah, every time I go, I get a little nervous because yeah.
And I still go, there is a sort of slightly sick feeling, and because they do double checks obviously on me now, and I go back into that same room where I got that news, and I always feel a bit nervous.
Totally understandable.
Yeah. But I kind of think I saved my own life.
You did.
That's such an amazing story around listening to your intuition, which we women, we really need to do. And I'm going to just say right now, if you haven't gotten a mammogram in a while, it's October. Let's do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also just do those checks, feel for the lumps. And
Yeah.
if you aren't happy with what somebody's telling you, if you think that they're being a bit flip or they haven't really taken you seriously, stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself. Because, I mean, I was lucky my doctor was very receptive and stuff, but plenty of other people who don't know their doctors might not have had the same experience. And I know that I was really fortunate. We caught it just in time.
Wonderful.
When they checked the lymph nodes, they tested 7, and it was in all of the 7 they tested. But amazingly, it hadn't got further than the arm.
So you went through treatment, and you obviously you're here, you're fine. But what about like alcohol in this journey? Yeah.
Well, nobody at any stage mentioned that alcohol and breast cancer, there was any causal correlation. That was never mentioned. And actually,
Fascinating. Yeah.
by the time I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I had been alcohol-free for 7 years through hypnotherapy. And I stayed alcohol-free through all through the breakup of the marriage and the financial problems and the initial diagnosis. Excuse me. It wasn't until I went back to the hospital after the initial surgery for them to sort of check everything and to be given the results of their lymph node tests. That's when they said it was in all 7 in a really high count. We need to check where else it's spread to. And I suddenly, at that point, very understandably, got very frightened. And I was terrified for my children because I thought their father, at the time, he was really mentally not very well at all. He'd disappeared off. He was in Australia and not really terribly much part of our lives. And I thought, if I die, these poor children, I mean, they were then 19 and 21, I can't die. And that's what I thought was going to happen, So I got very
How
scared.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And my go-to reaction was booze. That
Makes
was
sense.
my coping mechanism. It had been for a long time. And even though I hadn't drunk for 7 years, I went back to it. Now, I didn't, that was in January, early February of that year. And I didn't drink very much for the rest of that year because I was having loads more surgery and then chemo and then radiotherapy. So I didn't drink a lot because during all that treatment, you feel pretty rubbish, to be honest. But once I was better and stronger and going out again, and I just slipped straight back into how I'd been before the hypnotherapy, except lots of people thought I didn't drink anymore. So a lot of my drinking was actually on my own and secret, which I hated. I hated myself for that, but I couldn't seem to stop. And I got really kind of freaked out and panicked by it. I just thought, I've turned into my mother. I'm going to die early. I still didn't know about the connection between breast cancer and alcohol.
That's mind-blowing to me. Like, it's still mind-blowing that they... Yeah.
They just don't talk about it. It's extraordinary.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I speak to people. I saw somebody last week who's been very recently diagnosed, and I said, "Has anybody mentioned this as a matter of interest?" And she said, "No, nobody." So it's like a conspiracy of silence, which I think is
It really is.
wrong. Yeah, and it's not just breast cancer. There are all the sort of throat, mouth, neck cancers. We know bowel cancer, pancreatic cancer. Alcohol's a contributor to all of them.
How about all cancers?
Well, yes, yeah, but there is. I think the World Health Organization's. I think there are 6 or 7 where they say it's a direct cause. Now, it's obviously not the only cause of any of these cancers, but it is a significant contributory factor. And
It
I
is.
don't know if it was in mine or not, but yeah, it's an unnecessary risk. And the really stupid thing is, and I've kept it on my website because it's kind of educational, I think. But when I finished my radiotherapy, the last day of my treatment, a friend took me in and she bought a bottle of Prosecco, and we sat when we got home, we drank that Prosecco, and she took a photo. There's me sitting on the sofa bald with a scarf wrapped around my head with a glass of Prosecco in my hand as a way of celebrating the end of treatment for a disease where alcohol in all
Could have been a factor.
Yeah. It was just mad. But you don't know what you don't know, do you?
And you're not alone. I hear this all the time from my clients that have had different cancers, and then they celebrate because that's what we do. We celebrate with alcohol. It's culturally accepted, but we're getting wise. This alcohol-free movement we are trying to educate everyone. Yeah. Right now we're educating people on breast cancer. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always want to share the story as well that, like, check, and if you are at all worried, get a second test. Don't rely on just one thing. Mammograms are great and they save millions of lives a year for sure. But if you think there's something the matter, don't just rely on a mammogram to be told there isn't something the matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping to segue because I don't want to miss like you becoming a coach and then writing this book. So would you like to share a little bit more about what happened after that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I got alcohol free that last time through this Naked Mind. I floundered around, tried to do it all on my own and couldn't. I was just getting really down about it. And at some point I Googled, am I an alcoholic or something like that? Which, my tip to anybody is if you are Googling, am I an alcoholic? Then whatever an alcoholic is, I don't know what it is. There's no clear definition. But if you're worried enough to be Googling that, then you've probably got a degree of a problem with alcohol use disorder. So you might as well start to do something about it because it doesn't get better on its own.
Very sound advice. Yes.
And I came across this Naked Mind, and you both know that once this Naked Mind has got your email address, they are not going to let up. But I was really glad. I signed up for a course one morning. I was particularly hungover, and I just thought anything to get me out of this hell. And I paid about £1,000, which I didn't really have. I put it on a credit card and was just like, I just need to get this sorted. And then started panicking that I'd committed to some kind of crazy American woman or some loopy Californian cult. I didn't know what I'd signed up to at all. But as a reserved Brit, it was like, what have you just done? But it was honestly the best money I've ever spent because I was very quickly alcohol free. I read the book, started the course, and it just made so much sense. Yes. And I loved becoming aware that this wasn't my fault. That, I was just a human being who became addicted to an addictive substance. Yeah. No blame, no shame. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
And I then went, that was in 2018. And in the autumn of 2018, there was a conference in Denver for this Naked Mind, which I went to. And I'm still friends with some of the people who I met there. In fact, one of them messaged me today on LinkedIn. Which
That's amazing.
Yeah. At that, Annie was talking about training people as coaches. And I'd had a chat with her and she said, I think you'd make a really good coach. And I was going, yeah. And actually I'm embarrassed by what I said because I remember saying, I don't really want to make money out of other people's misfortune, which is just like, I don't know where that came from because I don't know what I thought doctors and vets and nurses do, but
right.
If you're going to you've got to pay your mortgage, you might as well do
exactly
some good at the same time.
Right.
But I think also I wasn't quite ready. I wasn't sure enough of my own sort of alcohol-free status at that stage. But a year later, I was approached again. I thought, actually, I think I will investigate this. And so I talked to Scott Pinyard, who was then head coach at this Naked Mind. I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this. And that's where I first met you, Ruby.
I know we were in the same coaching cohort. We call it like a cohort. Yeah. And you make friends for life when you, I mean, I meet with Tabbin every single week. We do like kind of a book club with another coach, Lorna, who we love. And it's really special. But
all these best friends that I've never actually met in real life. One day we will. So I trained as a coach, qualified, certified at the end of 2020. And my plan was to just coach part-time alongside my job in advertising. So I was evenings and weekends, and then I started to take Fridays as a non-working day. So I reduced my salary. And so very sort of, I love the way things come full circle. My mum died. I don't love that bit. But she left me some money. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough to give me the confidence to stop working in advertising and build up my own coaching business, knowing that I had enough money in the bank to pay the mortgage for a few months if I needed to.
Yeah. So
I resigned from my job, and I've been coaching full time since the beginning of 2022.
Yeah.
And my sort of niche, if you like, is because I came from a sort of professional background, if you can call advertising professional, I'm not sure you can, but that sort of a background. And I've coached a lot of people who are quite senior in careers like advertising and marketing, the law, media, insurance, sort of a lot of professions where there's a lot of client entertaining, and realised that the workplace contributes a lot to people's problems. They probably almost definitely were already drinking beforehand. Most people that go into those professions have been to university and will have been away and in that sort of culture of drinking, because our universities are quite boozy. But some jobs you go at, if you become a teacher, for example, you're highly unlikely, hopefully, to drink at work or in connection with work very much.
Maybe happy hours, teachers meet for,
Yeah, I think possibly after work. But with all the marking and the parents' evenings and all that sort of stuff, I say that. I mean, there are certain professions, though, where alcohol plays a big part.
Right.
And still does. It's not as bad as it was in the 80s, but it's still an issue.
Yeah.
And I just felt that if we can just change the culture in workplaces a bit, and there are lots of factors here. One is there's a sort of inclusion thing going on. We're very racially diverse now in the UK, and there are lots of people who simply don't want to drink for cultural reasons, religious reasons, and we're making those people feel excluded. So if somebody says, like a boss, they think they're being friendly and, come on everybody, I'm buying, who's coming to the pub after work this evening? And this is a real example, the young Muslim woman in that law firm, what does she do? She doesn't drink. She doesn't want to be around people who are drinking. But if she doesn't go to the pub, she's seen as standoffish, and she believes she's less likely to be one of the relatively small number who will get a permanent contract after the end of their training contract. So you're putting people in really difficult situations.
That's a really good example.
Yeah. And you don't have those friendly conversations that go on, at the pub, etc. Yeah. I mean, I had the same thing at my job. All of the people I worked with started going out to happy hours, but they left me out. Saw this email invitation, and I'm like, oh, everyone's going to happy hour. And I realized I didn't get the invitation because they knew I didn't drink.
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, I was like, well, I can come. I don't drink alcohol. I actually drink, beverages. So yeah, it's very, that was really, I was like kind of put out by that I wasn't even invited. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was in the wine industry, Tabbin, and that's another industry when you were talking about that golden mile, I mean, that's what it was like. We can't, in the wine industry, the alcohol industry, you can have cabinets in your office with all kinds of alcohol and invite people to taste or drink or lunches and especially dinners, always included it. It's definitely, it was very boozy, and as you can imagine, in the wine industry,
Yeah. So I just felt that the pro alcohol culture in workplaces is problematic, and it's causing a lot of sort of poor productivity because people in two ways, and the book is about how it's called Bottling Up Trouble and how alcohol is harming your business and what to do about it. And the main ways it harms the business are absenteeism, people just not being at work because they've got a hangover, but it's very rare that anybody says it's a hangover because that's not
they're just
acceptable
sick.
reason.
Yeah.
So they're sick, they've got a bug, they've got sickness and diarrhea, whatever. They'll say something else rather than the truth because they just fear getting into trouble. Then you've also got the factor of presenteeism, where people are turning up but hungover and they're not functioning properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was physically there, but my brain was foggy for sure. Yeah.
And sort of having to, getting into work a bit late, spending the first hour and a half just drinking coffee and thinking, I hope I'm not going to puke. Then making it through to lunchtime and eating badly and then just starting to get home. And often rinse and repeat. So that presenteeism affects people's productivity when they're at work, but it also affects the people who work with them. And some of them are having to cover for the person. Never mind the fact that when they're hungover, they may well make mistakes as well.
Yes.
So there's all of that.
And I'm just picturing myself back in those days. I was very grumpy a lot. Like I had a low, I remember just not being as kind, I think, overall.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And that affects the mood in the workplace. And if you're a manager and you're very hungover and being short-tempered and unappreciative of people, that has a really damaging effect
on the whole team. Yeah.
So there are those sort of softer measures. There's also the mental health aspect, because we know that alcohol is often used for stress, to manage stress, but actually exacerbates it.
Exactly.
So it exacerbates stress and anxiety and depression, which are the three most common mental health complaints that people are off work for.
Yeah.
So we've got an explosion of mental health problems in this country. I don't know if it's the same in the States. And
yes, indeed.
Alcohol is playing a part, but it's not being quantified. But we know it is a factor. So that, and a lot of people will be off sick. I did some work earlier this year and last year with the police, and spoke to police officers who were off sick, ostensibly for stress, but really for alcoholism.
Wow.
As they would call it. Yeah.
Wow.
But because they don't tell the truth, because they can't, because they'd get fired, they're not even getting the appropriate treatment. They're getting half a dozen counselling sessions for stress, and it's not stress.
And it's not stress.
Yeah.
So your book sounds amazing. Like who is this book for? Is it for the owners of the company, or like the people, or is it for just everyone? I think it should be for everyone, right? But
yeah, I mean, it's highly relevant for business owners and for HR and wellbeing teams.
Okay.
Because those are the ones who can do something about it straight away. But actually, what I've done is included within it a thing called the Bottling Up Trouble Assessment Tool.
Oh,
So that is it's a questionnaire that people can complete online, and they get a kind of instant report back. And it asks about things like the contract of employment and what happens if, at parties and corporate gifts and a whole range of areas where alcohol may or may not be embedded in the culture. And the idea there is that employees can do that test and then open a conversation with the managers and the board level, saying, do you know what, I think maybe we've got a bit of a problem. What would happen if we changed things here?
I'm so glad you did that and created this assessment.
Yeah.
This is really needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. When does? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. The other thing that I talk about a lot in the book is the role that we give alcohol for bonding. It's seen as the way to bring people together, and it's a way, but it's not the only way, and it's not the best way necessarily. And so just allowing people to have different ways to bond, do different things to get to know each other. And actually we're seeing quite an alarming trend at the moment where bosses are trying to get people to come back into the office after the pandemic, when people have got very used to working from home. And there is a downside to that because people don't get to know each other very well. So the bosses are saying, I know what, let's get them all together and give them free drinks.
Yep. I can.
And that'll get them in, and that'll get them bonding. You think, yeah, it's not. Can we not come up with something a bit better? And it's going to be different things for different people. I've heard of all sorts of different ways that people can get teams together, but it doesn't have to be over alcohol.
Right. It's like this enticement. I saw an advertisement in the newspaper where there was a new physician's practice, and they were inviting like an open house, and they were going to have a signature cocktail. I was like, what? A physician having a signature cocktail to entice people to come to their open house. I was just shocked.
That's
but
in the culture.
It's just in the culture. It's crazy. So what resources and support systems can businesses provide to help employees reduce or eliminate alcohol consumption? I think
that it starts with education.
Yeah.
And what I suggest to businesses is that the sort of whole area of alcohol use disorder, alcohol dependence, is a huge taboo. Nobody talks about it.
Nobody wants to touch it.
No. And so nobody fully understands the role of alcohol in stress, anxiety and depression. So the first port of call is to just include some alcohol awareness within stress management and well-being courses. And I call it the well-being conversation we're not having. And just there's a whole aspect to this that nobody's talking about, but it'll make a big difference.
Yeah.
So that's the start. And that won't change things for people who've already got a problem, because they've already got a problem and they probably need a bit more help. But it will help to hopefully prevent some people from getting into difficulty in the first place.
Yeah.
And the second thing is to talk about it. And there's a real barrier there, which is that for a managing director or chief exec to suddenly say, okay, I think everybody, we no more booze at work. They feel like a complete hypocrite, because they will be the one who's been drinking, probably more than most. Senior people, it's all on expenses, etc. So we have to change the culture so that those leaders can say, I've had a bit of a problem with this myself. Because if they kind of out themselves, in inverted commas, then and junior people see that it's okay and that you can still go on and have a good career, even if you have at some stage had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, then those junior people feel safe in asking for help. But as things are at the moment, I don't know that they do, because they think, I could get fired for this. And in the UK, you can be fired for having an alcohol addiction. I think it's different in the States. It's a
I
protected
think it is a little different.
It is.
Mhm.
It's a
But it's
protected
still
disability.
frowned
It's still a
upon,
stigma.
and it's still a
Yeah.
stigma.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But here you can actually be fired for it. So we have to change it. And I would love to see the law changed so that it's not. It is a protected disability, like having stress and anxiety, some mental health problems. Those are protected, but an addiction isn't. So, but that's not going to happen. Our government's got some bigger fish to fry, frankly.
Wow.
But we can change the culture so that and the law can follow, if you like. So it's allowing and encouraging good, strong leaders to say, yeah, this isn't good. This is what I was doing. This is what the rest of the board are doing. We're addressing this, and we want to offer help to anybody else who's struggling, and then to give people the support they need. And I think also employers very often think, oh, we'll lay that off on the EAP or the occupational health team, and they don't really investigate what's being offered. And all too often, what's being offered isn't appropriate for people.
Right.
So they just need to make sure that people are getting help that's appropriate for them.
Yeah.
Tabbin, you are doing such amazing work, and I'm so proud of you and your book. And you are just radiating and glowing. So I would love to transition to this. Like we always ask all of our guests, because our podcast is named Feel Lit, Alcohol Free. So what do you do to feel lit, Tabbin, in your life? Yeah.
I am a bit of an exercise junkie.
Okay.
I love feeling fit and strong. So probably 5 days a week, I'm in the gym first thing in the morning, like 7 a.m., doing a class, doing some strength and conditioning work, a mixture of the two. I also absolutely love getting out for a walk. I've got a dog who's getting a bit old now. He doesn't like walking as much as I do. So
Walk.
He stops and sniffs the grass a lot now. But so I do get outside and I live in a very, very beautiful part of England, and I just love getting out on the moor and walking for 2-3 hours. And I don't do that much during the working week because I'm working, but at weekends that's what I love to do, just get out there and be with friends. It's a really good way of catching up with people, and just get some exercise.
I just love when you say like walking in the moor. It's like a Jane Eyre book. And I'm like, and then you say it with that accent, and I just love it. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. And for our listeners who would just want to learn more about you and connect with you, and just where can they find the book? Can you let us know? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they can find the book via my website. My business is called winetowatercoaching.com.
Okay.
And the book is called Bottling Up Trouble. So you can Google, actually don't Google Bottling Up Trouble today, but by the time this goes out, it should be all linked up.
Yes.
But so that the Bottling Up Trouble will link into the website, and you can order the book on Amazon or and it's available internationally as well. So
So excited.
So exciting.
I love the name of your business too, Wine to Water.
I know. So cool.
Clever.
Yes.
Yeah, it's I don't know, I know it's a bit irreverent, but for me that was the true miracle. Was going the other way.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we had Tabbin as our special guest with a very inspiring story. And just a reminder, go get your mammograms, ladies.
100%.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah. And join our Feel It Facebook community as well. We'd love to see you in there. And we also are, if you want to see our faces, we are on YouTube. We have our YouTube channel. And thank you again, Tabbin. Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Feel It Alcohol Free Podcast. Do you have a question you'd like us to answer on the show?
All you need to do is head over to Apple Podcasts and do 2 simple things. Leave a rating and review telling us what you think of the show, and in that review, ask us any questions you have about breaking free from wine or living an alcohol-free lifestyle.
That's it. Then tune in to hear your question answered live. Don't forget to grab your copy of A Wine-Free Weekend at www.feelitpodcasts.com.
And remember, do something today that will help you feel lit.
See you next time.